It is time to start the international workshop on new developments of science, technology, innovation policies in Japan and Europe, organized by Tokyo Foundation for Policy Research. My name is Makiko Matsuo. I'll be serving as a moderator today. I am Senior Fellow, Tokyo Foundation for Policy Research, and also I am specially appointed professor at Tokyo University. Nice to see you all. Now, on behalf of the organizers, we'd like to ask Professor Hideaki Shiroyama, Research Director, Tokyo Foundation for Policy Research and Professor at Tokyo University, to take the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here to attend the Tokyo Foundation for Policy Research International Workshop and New Developments of SDI Policies in Japan and Europe. This webinar is co-sponsored by EU-Japan Center for Industrial Cooperation. The purpose of this program is for the SDI, or Science, Technology and Innovation Policy. The scope of itself has been changing. It's no longer the financial aid for technological research. It encompasses a wider purposes. Therefore, for the future SDI policy, when we discuss it, we have to look at the EU and the European countries' examples because they are like testing fields. In that sense, as a comparative study and international cooperation, European countries are very important elements. In this workshop, based on the Tokyo Foundation for Policy Research Programs, we have been working on the reconstruction of the SDI policies. Based on our research, we like to look at the current SDI policies in Japan, issues and challenges, and we like to review them. And at the same time, when we think about the mission-oriented SDI policy and the green transformation, there are different experiential efforts being made by EU and the EU countries. So we would like to listen to EU representative, and so that we can think about how the SDI policies can address the social problems. We can discuss it and clarify the future challenges and issues. So when we think about the broad scope of SDI, the regulations, policy, and the security policy, the relevance of these are increasing these days. So we would like to touch upon these elements. Today, we have 2 hours and 30 minutes. It's a limited time, but we hope that we will have an active discussions. And from the audience, we are expecting active participation and questions. And thank you very much in advance. Professor Shiroyama, thank you very much. Now we would like to move on to the reporting sessions. There is 30 minutes reporting from Professor Shiroyama as well as from Dr. Borras. Each will speak for about 30 minutes. So we will start with Professor Shiroyama. She will talk about the mission-oriented innovation policy challenges and issues.
So first we listen to the presentations, 2 of them, and then after that we'd like to take questions about the facts. And so during this session, we'd like you to write the questions to the QA box, and we'd like to take it later. Because of time, maybe there could be some questions that cannot be taken, so please accept that. So I'd like to speak about the implementation and issues of mission-oriented innovation policy in Japan, which is in the scope of the something that we have to consider in the transmission, the changeover of their activities or societies, which is transformation. So transformative, the innovation elements are common in Japan and in Europe. So there could be several elements which are common in these 2 countries, so these 2 areas. This will be taken up later in the Dr. Borras' presentation. But as was mentioned in my first part of my comment, we are talking about the addressing grand challenge, which is the specific issues that are very important and very large in the society. In tackling with this, it is important to target complex socio-technical system, which is the combination of the systems and the instruments and also technologies. This is the second issue that we can point out about the transformative innovation policy. And third is multiple actors in multiple sectors. So we handle specific policies, and then the factors are associated with each sector. And also, if we are talking about the multiple number of or complex socio-technical issues, that could be covering various industries and sectors. So it is important to involve the multiple actors from multiple sectors, and maybe as a consequence, we have to consider the package of several policy instruments. The funding can be something that you can consider, but this should not be the only thing. So we have to consider several issues, including regulations. So these are the elements of transformative innovation policies, and we are able to have the wide definition for this, the transformative innovation. But one of this is the program called mission-oriented innovation policies. As I will explain later, in what way are we able to define the missions? Well, that would be conducive to various changes or variations. So when we use the term mission-based or mission-oriented innovation policy or MOIP, this is very liquid, and this is not something that is sturdy in the definition. So we are able to say that this can be considered as the factor or one pillar in the transformative innovation. And I think MOIP has been implemented in Japan. And looking back into the six SDI basic plan, there has been the explicit mention of the transformative innovation policy. And also I will touch upon mission-oriented innovation policies. So the MOIP type program has been introduced from 2014 in the SIP programs, in the strategic innovation programs. This has been demonstrated. So that's something that is already taking place in Japan. These are the new types of SDI policies. So looking into the context of Japan, how this had come into this arena, and then I can say that this can be traced back to several decades. In the 21st century, we have seen some changes, and this has been put into the spotlight. And one such example is back in 2011. That was the fourth Science and Technology Basic Plan under the DPJ government. The stronger awareness of the need to address social issues like maintaining people's health and protecting the environment. And in one way, we can say that this was due to the change of the power, which was the birth of DPJ government in 2009. So, however, this was not the starting point of everything. Maybe in the very early stage of the 21st century, we have seen the advent of this kind of a move. And then this is a trend that we were able to see in the first 10 years. And then in 2012, there had been the change of the government, and there had been a new government centering around the LDP and Komeito, the Clean Government Party. And then they also continued thinking about the social policies and social issues. So that in that respect, the basic trend continued after the change of the administration back to LDP. So to be more specific, in 2016, fifth Science and Technology Basic Plan continued looking into the society, the 5.0. So the society 5.0 as social vision is that the government shared its vision for a super smart society of the future that would improve people's lives. However, some people say that the future vision is rather vague, but still they started getting interested into the future stage. So that means that this is a reflection of the sense of awareness. And then also, as to the strategies for the policies, there have been the dimension of the force. There has been the emphasis on the technology assessment in the fourth and fifth SDBT, and also convergence of knowledge, which is seen in the sixth SDIBP. So they are utilizing the term convergence of knowledge to mean that this is the comprehensive kind of knowledge. So this way, they try to have a good connection with the issues and the problems of the society. So with this in mind, what had been the governance structure that have been supportive of the changes? Again, we have to go back to the year 2001, which was the change of the government, the reorganization of the central government ministries and agencies in 2001. A Ministry of Education and Science and Technology Agency were merged into Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology next. And so this will be a bearer of the science and technology. And then on top of that, the new office was established as a cabinet office, contributing to strengthening cabinet functions. So many of the ministers would make contribution in the kind of work done by cabinet office. And then this was clearly stated in 2014 in the comprehensive preparation of an environment to promote innovation creation through the commercialization of research and development. Results were added to the jurisdiction of the cabinet office. So, and the name of the CSTP was changed to the Council for Science, Technology and Innovation, or CSTI. With this change of the governance, they have established a new system. And then, again, I'd like to speak about what I talked about, which is the Mission-Oriented Innovation Program, or MOIP. So this kind of program was born in Japan in a concrete manner. However, one thing that is quite noteworthy in Japan is that in this kind of mission-oriented program, this was not used as the standalone program, but rather this was taken up as the very diversified programs. As I just said, many of the institutions, independent from the cabinet office, have been involved. So this is a major the profile of the Japanese system. One is SIP, which is Strategic Innovation Program, which was started from 2014. The first step was introduced in 2014, the second phase 2018, and the third phase 2023. There has been an emphasis on social implementation, so this trend has been reflected onto the third SIP program. When I say SIP, as was mentioned, this is related to the CSTI, the CSTI within the cabinet office. So the governing board by private sector members of the CSTI direct the controls. So that means that direct control is made by the external parties. Program management is done with the external forces, and then program directors and program managers are established from the sourcing process from outside. Having said that, it is important to have collaboration with ministries and agencies. So the promotion committee comprising relevant ministries and agencies have been established. So this is a structure to enable all these. One more thing about the mission-oriented program is the Moonshot R&D program. This had been discussed from the year 2018, but this has been implemented from the year 2020. This has a long-term goal of grand challenges in 2050. So long-term, the setting of goals has been the core of the issue. And then because of the fact that this is long-term, this is very much focused on R&D, but generally speaking, we are able to say that. But at the same time, some of them are meant for the social implementation. So this establishment of this Moonshot program has been made with the formation of portfolio to combine these two. about this, goals are set at the CSTI or other cabinet level headquarters. So that means that we are able to say this is very much centralized in nature, but the daily management has been delegated to ministries and agencies. Here, there has been a support for social implementation and LC. So the framework is such that this kind of support is available. So this is what we have been working on in MOIP in Japan, mission-oriented programs, and then we have to try to understand the challenges that we are faced with in MOIP. But before that, I'd like to speak about the situation in Europe and EU. So I'd like you to take a look at this. Maybe Dr. Borras will speak about this in more details, but I'd like to give you a quick overview of the situation in Europe. In Europe, this is not only about the R&D, but also the demand creation. So everything should be put into one. So regulation, procurement, lead users, and this has been reported in the AHO report in 2006, and also in 2009, 7 rather, European Research Area had been issued to look at grand challenges as objective. So these are the things that had been taken up from the early 2000s, and then the program was formed based on this, which is Horizon 2020, which was covering 2014 to 2020. So in this Horizon 2020, one of the pillars was to deal with the social challenges. So that means that mission-oriented approaches had started with the Horizon 2020. However, having said that, there have been various evaluation, and at the interim evaluation of the Horizon 2020, and also in the LAMI report, this mission-oriented approach had been clearly mentioned. And starting with this, Horizon Europe was started in 2021. And within this 2021 Horizon Europe approach, there have been revised pillars in open science, global challenges, and industrial competitiveness. So they decided to have this kind of portfolio, which goes beyond the borders of the disciplines, intended to achieve the bold and inspirational and measurable goal within a set time frame. So I'd like to speak about what is taking place in Japan. What is different in Europe, rather? There have been the board of directors, and there is very important roles played by this board and the chair. And there have been external advisory functions involving citizens, and this is not only the strategic management, but the communication, monitoring, and evaluation functions have been exercised. For example, to what extent the businesses are involved or industries are involved, this has been quite varied depending on the theme. Then with this in mind, I'd like to speak about the mission-oriented programs in Japan, and also I'd like to identify some of the issues that we are faced with. First is the establishment of the system, or the issues related to the institutional setting and coordination. As mentioned, the programs were set at the cabinet office level, separated from ministries and agencies under the direction of the CSTI, which is Council for Science, Technology, and Innovation. So when I say under the direction, depending on the nature, the moonshot and other systems, it's different, but still there has been a direction exercised by CSTI. And then there should be many coordination efforts that's needed. So multiple MOIPs at the cabinet level, the demands that there should be some coordinations, and also there is a need for coordination between MOIPs and the ministry and agency programs, and among MOIPs, for example, including the moonshot. So I understand that there has been the same thing that is taking place outside. And then I go deeper into this. This is not only about the programs for R&D, but there is a need for linkage between background policy coordination and project coordination. So this is something that is not conspicuous, but still this kind of coordination is needed. This is one more thing that we have to point out.
The second areas of issues or challenges in Japan is as follows. We are working on this MOIP program. We developed it and are working on it. But how to operate it is the question. I mean, capacity issue, especially, is the problem. In the short term, where can we get the secure the mission manager? From where we can take it? And in Japan, as I said, the program manager or director talent often comes from the industry or academia in the past, but this was necessary in order to secure independence and sustainability. However, for the coordination within the government offices, they do not have any knowledge. So how to supplement that is the question. And in the case of EU, what's interesting is that mission managers, they come from the sectors where the mission is conducted. They are the deputy DG level people. And also to support the work, there is a research and innovation DG, which is the sectoral DGs. So they have concurrent responsibilities. So what would be the ideal model is the first question. The second question is the kind of skills required. Is it the analytical ability? Is it operational ability, coordination ability, or learning or reflection, competency? One has to learn greatly or change the direction. Is that what is required? So is this something that we have to secure as an individual capability or organizational capability? In that sense, what's the combination and the right mix of the talent in the organization? So that's the second area of issues. Next, I'd like to move on to the third area of issues. That is about the directionality and flexibility. We need to strike a balance between them. What I mean by that is that in the mission MOIP program, what is important is directionality or clear, having and showing a clear direction. That's what people say. In Japan, well, the control tower, we say in Japan, is important. However, when we say control tower function, once the direction is set, is it set in stone and following the same direction? Is that important? I don't think so. We need a certain level of flexibility. So, but when we say flexibility, there are different levels of flexibility. The mission may stay the same, but we may change how we achieve it. But it's not only limited to that. In some cases, including mission itself, we may have to be flexible enough to redefine the mission itself. However, if we change mission around too much, and then it's not good. So what is the right balance between directionality and the flexibility? This is one research I would like to introduce to you. This is by Professor Wanzenbach. So there are different types of missions, he says. When the mission or problem is clear, that's one thing, but sometimes the problem is not clear. Or the solution. Sometimes the solution is clear, or some other time solution is not clear. So there are different variation combinations of these two axes. So the worst is a disorientation where the problem or the solution are not clear, and then little by little we can clarify both. So when we have a combination of these two, how we can approach the right solution, there are different ways to go there, go to the goal. Anyways, when we say mission-oriented programs, there are different types. So within those, and also it's dynamic. The nature is changing. So we need to be able to redefine and also learn during the course of the program. Well, this is not the problem only in Japan, I think. For any mission-oriented program, it is a common challenge for the global audience. They all need to tackle these issues. So if we look at the Japanese example of MOIP, SIP is in its third phase already. We addressed issues such as autonomous driving, mobility. These are continuous themes. throughout. So with the time, how it dynamically changed. So to research into how it has evolved and changed within the time frame is an interesting research theme. So let me introduce some of the details on this program. Well, when it comes to SIP, as I said, this is already in its third term. During the first and second phases, basically, they looked at the autonomous driving system or hardware technology. So that was a question about the choice of technology. And then, but the answer was sort of clear. The solution was clear. However, what is it that we can resolve with this technological capability is something that they have continued to explore. Of course, it's not limited only to technical aspects. As you can see at the bottom of this slide, there are different options for research. One is autonomous driving elementary technologies like dynamic mapping. That's the technological side. But as you can see, so we can identify issues in society as well as the coordination with the police. But during the first and second phases, the focus on technology. And as you can see in the middle, the ultimate goal was to reduce the number of accidents, traffic accidents, reduce the traffic jam, and provide mobility during the Olympic Games. Those are specific goals. And the governments in the first and second phases, well, because the focus was technological option, that was driven by the PD was from the auto companies or OEMs. And their technological people, talent. And there was an involvement of police in terms of the traffic rules. They modified some of the traffic rules. So that was for the first phase. And in the second phase, basically it's the same. Basically, during the second theme, they continued to discuss the mobility choices and autonomous driving, and the specific target was explored based on that. Well, in the beginning, it was mainly about the reduction of traffic accidents and traffic jam, but they expanded into the mobility for disabled and aged senior people, as well as the response to the shortage of drivers for logistics and distribution. So they expanded to a little bit more social themes. So, but the first and second phases were sort of similar. However, in the third phase, there was a drastic change. As you can see, in terms of missions, it was no longer just about existing autonomous driving. And they explored the new mobilities in local areas and how to establish the platform for the local areas. And then it's no longer about the technology, autonomous driving. They talked about the software, share ride, and drone were even put into the scope. So by redefining the missions, the kind of technological options were also redefined. So there was a dramatic change in the third phase. The governance structure was changed as well. The PD was no longer from the auto company. It was from the academia on the public transportation. And coordination was expanded not only to the police, but also the digital agency and Ministry of Labor. So the options may become diffusive when we expand the scope. And after the first year, what they are discussing today is try to focus on the scope as they have different options. So that's the change within SIP. But if you look at the background, the cross-agency dialogue, coordination, and discussions were also important because they are all linked. From 2024, SIP started, but as of 2023, already IT General Strategic Headquarters within the Cabinet Office addressed the roadmap for the IT. So within that is the public-private digital map. or ITS was already discussed. So these things became available, and this is revised every year. And 2014, 18, 19, 20, and 21, those roadmaps were revised. And within those roadmaps, what is it that autonomous driving is solving? That kept being redefined. So from the second to the third phase of SIP, there was a drastic change, as I said, and that was reflected in this roadmap. And in the beginning, they were aiming at the safest road transportation in the world. But from 2018, because of the aging society, safe and smooth road transportation society, it became the issue. And regional revitalization was also set as the goal. And by 2020, the goal mission included the region by region scenarios. And 2021, it was no longer about the approach just focusing on autonomous driving. That was not enough. So people started saying that we need to have a fundamental review. And in that process, this ITS roadmap, that how we can redefine this, is now being discussed under the digital agency. Using digital technology, this is being readdressed. So as one of the tasks, they are trying to secure the mobility in local areas. In the past, it was just a limited test driving, but in the social implementation, they have to look at different scopes. And the supply side issues have to be tackled. And also related institutions may have to be reviewed as well. So trial and error was how I can describe this process. In the mission-oriented program, MOIP program, you can see how things have changed. And also the coordination processes between different agencies were also changed in parallel. So this kind of learning and adaptation mechanism is quite critical. So how we can manage these through changing dynamics is important. So that was a brief explanation of problem we have faced in Japan. This may be uniquely in Japan, and some of them may be common to the rest of the world. So this concludes my part. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Shiroyama. So in the report, the transformative innovation in the past is now being reviewed, he said. And in the background, we had a grand challenge discussions. But even before, the interest of society has been increasing. And then, referring to the European examples, he discussed how MOIP, Japanese MOIP, mission-oriented innovation policy, has evolved, and what kind of problems it has tackled, and what are the capabilities required, and the directionality, flexibility, balance issue was also discussed, how we can cope with this. So those are the 3 points Professor Shiroyama talked about. And he concluded with the SIP program example in the area of autonomous driving, and in the time frame, how it has dynamically evolved. That's what he has talked about. Thank you very much.
Moving on, we'd like to ask Dr. Susana Borras to give us the second lecture. So allow me to take some time to introduce the doctor. She is from the Copenhagen. She is teaching green innovation and green transition and innovation policy designs. So she is also working on the research and the human resources development, and also the governance and innovation of the social issues. And also at this point, the capacitor is currently she is leading the research project Capacitor about the capacity of public sector organizations in green transition. This will be taken up in the presentation. So she is a leader in this capacitor project. And also Dr. Susana Borras has been advising governments and institutions at the international national level. Please take a look at the slide. So this is about the new developments of science and technology and innovation policies in Japan. This is about the new dynamics of SDI policy in Europe, missions and transformative policy for grand challenges. Professor Borras, please take the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. Yes. So thank you very much for inviting me to be here with you. I'm going to be talking about the new dynamics of science, technology, and innovation policy in Europe. And I'm going to be talking specifically about missions and what we call transformative policy. And this is for what we also call the grand challenges, the grand problems in society and the economy. So what I'm going to be talking today is that first I am going to talk about that the science, technology, and innovation policy in European countries are increasingly focusing on missions, and they are increasingly focusing on transformative innovation that is for addressing the grand challenges. Then I will talk a little bit about also what Shiroyama-san mentioned about the problem-oriented focus, that, you know, this is need a new approach to STI policy, science technology policy. Then when we are talking about missions, it's about action, it's about the impact and the real effective transformation that is going to happen in our societies and our economies. So the technology put into the context of use, to be used by society. And this is about a policy that is beyond the aspect of curiosity of humankind, of, you know, looking at new knowledge, or for improving the industrial competitiveness. It is also about a policy that is looking for solving real problems now. And what I'm going to be talking about is two dimensions. First is about how to design, how to create these new STI policy instruments. How are we going to put this mission-oriented policy into the real, you know, action? And then the second point, the second dimension I'm going to be talking about is the implementation, how this is going to be done in practical terms, in reality. And for this, I would like to focus on the capacity of the public sector organizations to be able to do that. So these are going to be the contents of my presentation today. So what are the grand challenges, if I might start with some background information? They are complex and large problems. So there are many different aspects. They are very complex problems. They are typically long-term. These are problems that have been here for a long time with us, and they're going to take a long time to be solved. They require market, but also non-market aspects. So it's not only about putting a product into the market or changing the regulation that allows a product to be sold or put into a kind of a market. There's also about non-market aspects of being, you know, behavior in society, about the way in which the visions are shared. And there's a kind of, you know, everything translate on the use of that technology into a real solution. So it's market and non-market aspects. And of course, as I said also before, technology is not the only aspect. They are about also changing behavior. So it's not about introducing new technology and and that's it. It's about, you know, thinking in a context where society changes behavior. So the sustainable, I mean, one of the examples of grand challenges are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that were put forward in 2015. So we have issues of poverty, of hunger, of health, education, gender equality, clean water, clean energy. That's quite important. Economic growth and decent work, innovation. So, you know, so sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption, climate. That's very important as well. Life below water, life on Earth. So there are different dimensions. There are different kind of grand challenges, and typically these are, you know, there are many ways of defining the grand challenges. There are many ways of defining goals. But each of these kind of goals have very specific targets. So we have many specific targets, and some missions are focusing on those targets. But missions are not only the problems defined by the United Nations. There are many other problems, and governments are thinking differently, of course. So in STI policy, we have this focus on missions, and we have to focus on transformation, meaning that it's about contributing to address those grand challenges, solving them. Technology and innovation can help solving them, but it's not the only thing. For example, if we're thinking about phasing in the gradual introduction of zero emission fuels and zero emission technologies, is also about phasing out, so decreasing the use of fossil fuel technologies. All this kind of phasing in and phasing out. Or, for example, if we're thinking about providing medicines to neglected diseases, markets are not enough. So we need other processes of creating those medicines with partnerships that actually help those medicines to reach the global poor. So, of course, you know, we need to combine. So it's not about, I think here, pendulum, so goes through time, from the general enabling technologies like IT, software, but also to the more and more specific combinations of knowledge and technologies. The more we think in context, the more we think about a solution, the more we realize that we need to combine different types of knowledge and different types of technologies. So the solution is not coming only from one technology, but it's coming from many different dimensions. And it's about bringing them together. And that's where sector policies and sector areas are important. So it's not only about the general technologies, it's very much about the sector where the economic and social sector where those technologies are being used. It's very important. So this is where we have that science, technology, and innovation becomes more and more embedded and related to sector policies. For example, transport, energy. So, of course, it's about creating new knowledge, it's about creating new technologies, but it's also about bringing them in the context where things are happening. And that requires a sector where there is regulation, where there is rules of behavior, where there is some market opportunities, where there is some kind of social expectations and social behavior. So we think in the sectoral terms in a very kind of broad context. But putting this science, technology, innovation to solve grand challenges, to do that is not easy. It's not easy. First, we need specific goals, which we call missions. and which are setting clear specific targets, specific goals. It also requires the interaction of many different actors, like public actors, private, and also private, not-for-profit. We have a lot of private foundations that are private, not-for-profit. I think are very important actors. We also have the civil society that is organized, sometimes more organized, sometimes less organized, but is a very important sector. And all these needs to work together. And that's not easy. There is a lot of risks and opportunities because we don't know the solution. You know, we know the problems perhaps, but sometimes the solutions are not very clear, and there might be some risks in using some technologies, or there might be some opportunities in using them. And what is important is to be able to create new solutions, and creating those new solutions might need to phase out some other technologies. And there are so many path dependencies. There are many kind of routines and changes. So it's from the point of view of the science and technology policy, it's about creating specific policy instruments. And we heard earlier about the Japanese different policy instruments. This is actually what I'm going to be explaining a little bit about Europe. So we're proposing to think about two dimensions: the design of policy instruments. So when, for example, governments give money, or governments are providing some new regulations. And then the other dimension that is very important, the second dimension, is the public sector capacity, the capacity of organizations to implement and to do the changes that are required. So when we think about traditional policy instruments in science technology policy, are typically about funding. So the government gives money to some specific technology or scientific field. And it's about, creating this kind of context where there is this kind of funding, where private actors cannot, or creating this kind of collaborative frameworks. But now what we have also is that in the grand challenge context, in the context of missions, these policy instruments need to also be able to include new actors. So it's not only about giving public funding to industry or to universities, but it's also about having civil society involved to be a part and participant of some of the finding some solutions. We might also need to have private non-profit organizations also engage in this. And we need to have this kind of funding mechanisms that are longer in perspective, because oftentimes the government funding comes in a very short time span, which is difficult when we have very, very long-term problems to solve. So now there's a lot of discussion about the funding from the government needs to also be long-term, or at least work in a process that, gives longer time for the projects. So we have done some research recently. We have been using a database from the OECD that is called STEEP Compass, and it's a database about policy instruments. So the different instrumentation, the different things that governments do for missions. And what we have been doing is that we have compared those policy instruments. So I can give you an example of the OECD database, examples of grand challenge and mission-oriented policy instruments. For example, we have in the USA, we have this USA Global Development Lab, and they have created these different kind of labs In Sweden, we have this Grand Challenge or Challenge-Driven Innovation Program, which has been a very interesting new program, which actually funds projects of international eminence and develops solutions that are targeting specific social challenges. And then we have Turkey, who has created this kind of healthcare. So these are three examples that I just want to give you. And here what we have look at is what types of actors are engaged in those programs. Because here we have that the US government has been giving funding to researchers in universities and research laboratories and public laboratories, but also to civil society to collaborate to give some kind of solutions to that. In Sweden, the Grand Challenge or the Challenge-Driven Innovation Program is a policy instrument that has been funding researchers, but also firms, companies, and civil society in some specific projects. And in Turkey, they have been doing also different kind of also researchers and firms. So these are some examples just to give you what they're actually doing. And I wrote together with a colleague, David Howald, a paper about what we studied. And we studied a database, and we did a large number statistical analysis. And what we did is that we studied how far these new instruments, the instruments are really going and engaging groups that are new groups. So they're not the usual academia, university, and industry, but also engaging other civil society or other groups. And we found that despite the advancement of the Grand Challenge idea, the Grand Challenge rationale, the design of the policy instruments was only partly following those principles of engagement with civil society. So we have some instruments that have been approaching that, what we call with wider constellation of actors, but we also have that the actors like civil society organizations, they are very limited participating. So so what we are trying to say is that in the OECD, many countries in the OECD, even those who have mission-oriented and grand challenge-oriented STI policy instruments, they still need to kind of really engage with the civil society actors in a wider. And I think that Shiroyama-san's presentation about Japan, different phases of the automated driving, actually shows very interestingly that the third phase was very much into widening the perspective, but also engaging with other type of new actors. When the society became involved, they say, well, these are the problems that we really need. And so that was actually a way of expanding, but also making much more real solutions to the real problems and putting the technology to work in a real context. So this is actually to say that we found that comparing most of those instruments, there were still a way to go. We still need more engaging with the society. This is another paper that I wrote with a colleague of mine. Let me move this so you can see a little bit. This is an article I wrote with a colleague of mine, Sylvia Schwarzenegger. She is from Sweden, and we studied the design of transformative science and technology policy instruments. We studied that in 4 Nordic countries, in Denmark, in Finland, in Norway, and in Sweden. And we studied how those we identified 4 very important different funding programs, which is a very important instrument. And we identified that there has been some kind of differences. We studied those 4 countries, and we focused on 4 programs. And we studied whether there was directionality, experimentation embedded in policy mixes, so different criteria of what normally and officially is considered to be mission-oriented. We studied these different criteria, and we found that following all these criteria, that 2 of the programs were weakly nested. We call this a theory, but they were relatively weak, and that was Denmark and Finland, because there was little stakeholder involvement, civil society involvement was very little. There was relatively little cross-agency collaboration, and the time frame for funding was also limited. But in Norway and Sweden, we saw that they were far stronger. They were better in terms of fulfilling these criteria. These are 2 countries that have been moving very strong into the mission-oriented programs. So now I'm going to be looking at the European Union level. And in the European Union level, there has been different missions. In 2021, there were defined 5 missions that is about kind of very ambitious goals to deliver solutions to the grand challenges. And as you can see, they are they have different years. And one has been to adaptation to climate change. Another one has been the cancer, which is health. The third one is about the seas and oceans and coastal and inland waters. Number 4 is about smart cities and climate neutral smart cities. And then the last one is about soil health and food. If you notice, basically number 1, number 3, 4, and 5, they are about environmental issues, and in different ways. So the environment and the green solutions for the future is very important. And then this one is only about, it's important as well, of course, it's a specific disease, which is a very complex disease, of course. So what is the kind of the European Union doing? What are missions? What are missions in the European Union? They are about putting together the necessary resources for funding programs, but also regulations at different levels. So the willingness is to create a big moving all together, not only putting money into research and innovation, but also following with all the regulatory framework that is necessary, not only at the EU level, but also at the national and the regional and the local level. So it's a kind of very kind of holistic or global approach, a big approach to the mission. Missions in European Union are about mobilizing society and private actors, such as research institutes, farmers, land managers, entrepreneurs and business angels and investors, all together to create a lasting effect. So this is actually a very ambitious to put all these actors together. And it's about creating solutions. It's not only about creating new knowledge. It's not only about creating new technologies. It's all about the uptake and the impact of those technologies to solve the problem. So each mission has a governance structure. There is a mission manager, which is a EU Commission coordinator, which is a civil servant, which is a sector embedded, and then there is a a specific, special DG or ministry, European Union ministry, as you can call it, also from research to give support on that. And then there is a chair of the mission board, which is typically a high-level politician. And this is actually to create visibility, to create media visibility, to create a communication with this vision and connections to political levels. And then there is an expert committee, which is a mission board. And this mission board is formed by 10 members that are appointed as individual experts that give advice to the chair and to the manager to the direction and how to put that into practice. But the implementation of the 5 different missions in the European Union is different because each of the topics is quite different. And for example, the city mission, it's being coordinated by Net Zero Cities, which is a network of networks of different cities in Europe around climate KIC. It's a kind of European association, a big organization. And 100 cities in Europe have been selected, and they are now in the process of implementing everything. And each of the 100 cities, they have to do a climate city contract, of which there is a specific plan of what they want to do, which technologies they want to use, and what kind of new research is needed and new technology is needed for that. And basically, they can apply for funding in the Horizon Europe, which is a big funding program in the EU. And they can do it in a specific mechanisms. So it's a way of putting forward the pulling together the cities and bringing the needs and the need for solutions, bringing that very strongly together with the researchers and apply for EU funding for doing research that is mission oriented. So I'm going to move this here. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. Now we come to the second dimension of what I wanted to tell you, because one thing is to design the programs, but then the next thing is how those public sector organizations are really putting them into implementation. And here the cities are important. I want to see, we have 100 cities in Europe now, which have committed themselves to be engaged in this mission, which is climate zero. And they are able to be part of some funding, applying and getting some funding to do some research activities and to put them into their reality, into their kind of context of their own city. But the question is, do those cities, do those municipalities have the capacity, the organizational capacity to do that? Because we might have very ambitious targets, we might have very ambitious goals, but if those organizations do not have the capacity to do everything, nothing will happen. So public sector organizations like municipalities here are entrusted to create change and address grand challenges. But the question is whether they can do it, whether they have the capacity to engage with that. When they do that, when they engage, they need to mobilize a lot of resources. Imagine these 100 municipalities, someone in the municipality, the politician, the mayor, said, we want to be part of this, one of the mission. That's very good. But then the civil servants are thinking, how are we going to do that? And they need a lot of resources to engage in that. And so again, it's not about only the new technology and the new knowledge, but it's also about transforming these socio-technical systems in the cities, right? So whenever you want to use, for example, electrical buses, you need to change dramatically the way you organize or you want to provide electrical ferries in these cities that they are coastal cities. So there's a lot of path dependencies that need to be changed, and the municipalities need to be very active into doing that. So phasing in the new technologies, but also phasing out the old ones. So this is what we're studying in Capacitor, which is a research project at Copenhagen Business School. And we are looking at that. And so I'm going to be relatively quick about that because my time is going out. We are studying the way in which public actors, in this case municipalities, are actors in the governance of socio-technical change, implementing missions, and the governance of that, the governance of those missions and those socio-technical change is very complex. And we're asked, what is the capacity? And we think about, when we think about a municipality that wants to be part of that mission, they need to have some resources. They need to have some people. They need to have some money, a budget. They need to have as well a very clear political mandate, because it's sometimes they're so they need to have a clear political mandate, and that mandate sometimes is very clearly defined in the mission statement, but some other times it's not so clearly defined. So the clarity of the mandate, it's a very important resource. And then we have here the routines and abilities and practices, because many municipalities, they have a lot of procedures about how to do things, but those procedures might need to change. And also they need to have new abilities, new ways of doing things. That's actually quite important. And then we say that some municipalities might be very active and proactive, engaging and taking roles to be very entrepreneurial, very proactive. Some other cities will be just doing the minimum. So taking those roles is very important. So we think about, when we talk about the capacity of public sector organizations to engage in delivering, in implementing missions, the resources they have, the roles they assume, they take, they perform, and the abilities as the way of the routines and coordination that they do is very important. So we have this slide here showing that there's an interaction, and that the capacity of a public sector organization might be expanding through time. So it's actually, everything is related here. So to summarize, SDI policy missions are those for addressing grand challenges, are about transformation, and transformation is about changing behavior, not only introducing new technologies, but changing behavior, and also engaging with civil societies. This requires thinking how to implement the missions in a real actionable way. So we need to focus on two dimensions. We need to focus on the dimension of how we design policy instruments that are clear and towards that idea. And we saw, for example, that Norway and Sweden, they had very strong policy instruments, but other countries could actually have them stronger. But it's also about building the capacities of public sector organizations, among others, for example, the municipalities, to make those grand challenges and missions to be fulfilled. Thank you very much.
はい、ボラス先生どうもありがとうございました。ご発表の
Thank you very much. In your presentation, you talked about the SDI policy becoming more mission-oriented, and as they do so, they have to integrate various different intelligence and knowledge, and you have to combine different technologies together, and then you have to implement it in a sector or sectorial or cross-sectorial way, and in that, the policy instruments you talked about, there are different policy instruments that one country can possibly take. I don't know how to translate into Japanese, but the policy instrument design is one of the critical factors. And but that's not enough. Even if you have the good design of policy instruments, you have to have the public sector, especially organizations, to be able to carry out those missions. So the capacity is another critical area. So Dr. Borras, you said you are involved in this capacitor program, and you briefly introduced the program. And in the program, two aspects. One is resource, like people and money. Another is political mandate, and the other is the ability, like routine practices and procedures and steps. And furthermore, on top of those, roles will have to be clearly defined for the public sector especially. So you showed us the triangle chart to show how the capacity can be expanded. Thank you very much for that.
At this point, we'd like to take questions about, I was thinking of taking questions about the facts, but because of time, we cannot do this. So we'd like to cover that at the final discussion. Maybe we could take questions from the floor. So that's how I am going to do the Q&A. So we'd like to proceed. We would like to ask for comments from the colleagues. We'd like to ask Dr. Kishimoto and Dr. Suzuki to make comments for 10 minutes each, and then after that we'd like to have the discussion. So we would like to invite members of the research team, and also this discussion will be participated by Dr. Borras as well. So we'd like to proceed as I just explained. Now, at this point, we'd like to ask Dr. Atsuo Kishimoto, the research director, Tokyo Foundation for Policy Research, and also the head of the LC Center of the Osaka University Science Technology Innovation Policy Center. Dr. Kishimoto is going to make a comment based on his background. So I'd like to briefly explain I'd like you to briefly explain your background as well. Thank you very much for your introduction. I am a member of the Tokyo Foundation for Policy Research program, and here I am responsible for the review of the regulations here. Now, against this backdrop, I am working on the analysis of the impact of the regulations. So this is also about the mission-oriented innovation policy. According to the definition, this is the coordinated package of definition of measures, policies and measures. So this is coordinated package of the regulatory instruments. So this is incorporated into this definition. So here, definition is the regulation is a very important part according to OECD. Now, in Japan, when we use the term regulation, we sometimes think about the kind of things that would give limitation to the people's the will or people's activities. So this, in many ways, had been considered as a negative. But in recent years, things are changing, and in many cases, the regulations are going to be used in order to provide for support, so maybe to promote what we try to do. In the case of mission-oriented innovation policy, I try to identify the new issues related to this. So when I say the regulations implications, I think the mission-oriented regulation is something we have to consider. Mission-oriented regulation should be strategically designed. So this is one thing we have to aim for. According to Dr. Borras, this is very much the policy instruments. So this should be part of the policy instruments. And so mission-oriented regulation should be designed as a part of the instrument. And this new type of regulation, in the broad sense of the word, should be designed. And the capability and capacity of doing this should be created in the TSO or the public organizations. So that's how we are able to put it. So I was listening to the presentations. I felt that this is something we have to continue to do. Now, I'd like to speak about the update of the regulations at this point. In this project, we think about regulations, and I try to work on the update of the concept of regulation. To start with, regulation is something to tamper with certain activities or to delay the process. And then the new emerging technologies or to implement that in the society in Japan. Maybe situation in Silicon Valley might be different, but in the case of Japan, many Japanese businesses would not be able to go into the business if we don't have any clear the regulation. So because of the fact that it is impossible to see the future clearly, we have to have the regulation. So that means that investment is not made possible because when the regulation is not clearly stated. So in that situation, for the emerging technologies and also for the implementation of the technology into the society, regulations are of the essence. This is indispensable. And also in order to promote the SDI, and also in order to have higher competitiveness in the international arena, regulation can be used. So maybe we should be able to update the concept for regulations. So in this project, we have been discussing this issue, and then come to think of it, when we say mission-oriented the innovation policy or MOIP, we have not been able to discuss the issue of the roles that the regulation can play, at least in Japan. So about the updating of the concept of regulation, in 2018, World Economic Forum issued a white paper for the agile the regulations, and also in 2022 there had been a report issued for the fourth industrial revolution, and OECD also in 2022 used the term harness, which is the regulatory governance. They issued the recommendation for the agile the governance, and also in the United Kingdom, they have the regulatory horizon council, so-called, which is to look into the growth industry in the future in the UK. So in order for the UK industry to lead the world, they decided to provide the recommendations for the regulations that will be forward-leaning. So just recently, they reported on the quantum computing and also engineering biology, and also in Canada, they have the regulatory competitiveness, which is the competitive advantages in the area of regulation. So they have the committee of experts to look into this. So they are doing similar things. So as was mentioned, this is based on the updated view of the concept of the regulations. However, having said that, MOI, this kind of activities and the MOIP had not been directly linked. So at this point, there has not been the direct linkage between the two areas. So from now on, I think it is important to think about the relationship with these moves and the mission-oriented innovation policy. Dr. Borras talked about two dimensions. The second one, which is and also about this, in order to promote innovation, we have to have the necessary regulation, and also we have to have the innovation which should drive the country's international competitiveness. So BSO. The capabilities are important, which is the capability of the public entities. I realize that. So maybe we are able to say capability of the regulation designs or the governance designs. So when we use the term regulation, we could think about the legally binding regulations, which is the smaller inside in the definition. And also we could think about soft laws or there's something that goes beyond the legally binding issues. So we have to first think about the menus, what kind of regulations are needed, and also benefits and the disadvantages and the cases in the past, the successes and failures, or maybe we could increase the items in the menu. And also, we can have the assessment of the impact of regulations which have been done in the United States and Europe. Or maybe we can think about the involvement of stakeholders for the designing stage of the regulations. We could expand the scope of stakeholders in this area. So, and also we can think about the materials for the human resources development. If we are to think about the training, we need to have this kind of a list. And also, especially in the context of AI in Japan, we have some concerns in this area. The deregulation in many ways are considered to be good, and the regulation is considered to be something that tampers with the advancement of technologies and the new industries. And in other countries, with the advancement of the regulation policies, if we continue to stick to the soft law alone in Japan, and then in that situation, we would be lagging behind. So in some cases, we would have difficulty catching up with the regulation in the rest of the world. So regulation designing is something that we have to work on. So we have to create or develop people with this capability. Regulations should be used as the strategy, and that should be the driving force for innovation. And then we have to consider the design of innovation to this goal, and then in what way are we able to develop human resources to drive that? That's something we have to consider from now on. That's my comment. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Kishimoto. So you were talking about the research group activities. Many people say that having the regulation is applying a brake. So many people say that this is limiting their activities, but we have to change our mindset so that the regulation can be seen as a driver for innovation. In this way, we are able to transform technology and society. So Dr. Kishimoto used mission-oriented regulation. So this is a new term that he coined. So in the policy instrument, we could incorporate this in order to enhance the international competitiveness. We could update the concept of regulations, and then this kind of thing can have good relationship with the MOIP. So maybe Dr. Borras might want to make a comment on what Dr. Kishimoto said. And also, this is related to the second point of Dr. Borras. So it is important to make sure that we develop people's design capability of the regulation and also governance. So Dr. Borras used the term designs. So this is the area where it is important to have human resources and also to enable these people in doing this. So I'd like to move on to Dr. Suzuki.
So Dr. Suzuki is at the airport at the moment. Did you get a space for you? Yes, I just arrived at the hotel. Oh, you're in the hotel. So were you able to listen to other speakers? Yes, 70 or 80%. I followed. I see. Then he's one of the members of the research group and a professor of the University of Tokyo. He's a research director in our group. So Dr. Suzuki, could you introduce yourself, including your background, and give us some comments?
Speak in English, so I am speaking now, and I think that there will be a translation available. So my name is Kazuto Suzuki. I'm just arrived in London from Taipei, so this is a busy traveling period. I am currently working on the issues with regard to the science and technology policy and the international security. I'm a member of the National Space Policy Council in Japan, and also I am a member of the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industries Council on the industrial policy, and as a subcommittee of the security issues, which is dealing with questions of the export control and industrial policy. So my comment for both Shiroyama Sensei and Borras Sensei are the first. It is extremely important to have to transform the science policy towards more mission-oriented policy, MOIP. And I think this is a fundamental change of the traditional R&D program to more mission-oriented one. Nevertheless, I think there is still a very strong assumption on the mission-oriented innovation program is that if you accomplish some sort of a mission, then you'll be able to gain a certain industrial capabilities or industrial competitiveness. I think Kishimoto Sensei has mentioned about the power of regulations to encourage innovations for the more competitiveness. But the question about the mission-oriented programs such as SIP or the Moonshot program, although they are focusing on the missions, but not really focusing on the industrial applications. So how does this mission-oriented program can be implicate the industrial motivations and the industrial capabilities, especially today in the context of the economic security, which is another subject that I'm working on, is that the economic security is extremely careful about the possible transfer of technologies which are innovated by those programs, and also because of the application not only limited to the question of the industrial capabilities and the competitiveness, but also the security implications. For example, the investment in the AI and the development of the AI program would have a possibility to use those technologies for enhancing the military capabilities. And this is one of the reasons why the United States has set up the new regulations on the export control over semiconductor. The semiconductor is now being the sort of hotspot of these question of the industrial innovation and security issues. And I think the United States has transforming its regulatory program, not only focusing on the industrial capabilities, but focusing more on the security and also with an employment or the national economic structure. For example, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is encouraging more investment in the United States or the Northern American continent for subsidizing electric vehicles. And these are today it is the question of the science and technology and innovation does not limit it to the application of these technologies to the social missions, but social applications, but also it has to consider beyond the social applications, and it has to be taking into account the security implications and the industrial capabilities. So those are the major issues, and I think Japan is now is activating the program called the K-PRO, which is the economic security research and development program. And this K-PRO is one of the new element of the science and technology policy, and the SISTI also takes more significant investment in the Anshin Anzen, which is the safety and the security related technology, largely because of historically Japanese academia were not really working together with the security-related technology because of its history. So this transformation of the policies has now been taken place in Japan and but in the European Union, largely because the European Union is the competence of the European Union is not about security. So European Union itself has no program which is directly related to the a security issue, but nevertheless, the industrial policy are now transforming or paying more attention to the security policy. Therefore, the European Union has issued the new defense industry strategy, which was released a couple weeks ago. And I think this is a new trend for the European Union to focus on the security oriented or any R&D R&D program which has security implications. So I think both Japan and Europe, which are starting from very civilian R&D program and focusing on the mission of these programs, including environment and the safety. But also, I think this is a time that we need to think of the more comparative studies with regard to the security strategies and the R&D policy. And I think it is extremely important, and I think in the many European analysts in agreement that that is, the transformation of the United States, the U.S. R&D policy have a strong implications or impact on the way in which that we decide, or we make decisions on the security or R&D related policies. So I think it's not just we are looking at from our endogenous policy making issues, but also we need to think of the impacts of the transformation of the U.S. R&D policy and its effect on the R&D policy in Japan and European Union. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
入ってかなあ、はい、鈴木先生どうもありがとう。
Thank you very much, Dr. Suzuki. Well, earlier, you talked about the mission-oriented policy and its relationship with the Dr. Kishimoto talked about its relationship with the regulations, but Dr. Kishimoto talked about it, but Dr. Suzuki talked about the relationship between the MOIP and industry. In the first part, he talked about the relationship, but in the latter half, Dr. Suzuki talked about the MOIP, the relationship between MOIP and security, given the dynamically changing defense and security landscape today. We have to think about it because it's been changing the situation, and it does not be just a thought about in Japan. We also think about other countries, and on a global, national, local levels, in different levels, we have to think about the missions in that respect. So that was the comments made by Dr. Suzuki. So now we have covered two research group members' comments. So here, we would like to get the reaction from Professor Shiroyama first, and then next from Dr. Borras. So if you are ready, please, Shiroyama sensei.
Thank you very much for your comment. About the first comment by Dr. Kishimoto, he talked about the relationship with the regulation And you have a good point. In the case of mission-oriented program, it says coordinated package. So this is a mission program's definition, but come to think of it, this might be the definition for all the policies. So that can be interpreted as such. So if you try to implement certain policy, it doesn't have to be the connected to the instrument, but there could be regulation and rules, and hard technology is one instrument, and also there could be some kind of nudging which would drive the change of behavior of the people. So when you say in mission-oriented program, it is not that this talks about the single mission, but if you think about the entire picture, this can be applied to all the policy issues. And then conversely, I think this is very important, interesting, as the research director of the Tokyo Foundation Policy Research. And then we have to try to think about how this would be connected to the ways they used to think about the policies. So under the name of mission-oriented innovation policy, we can consider the old way of doing things, but at the same time, new things are being driven alongside with that. So again, needless to say, one of the most important part is utilizing the regulations. And one more thing is about what we do in the regulation. So he said that it is dangerous to have just one thing, which is the soft law alone. So it is important to have combination of the different rules, including soft laws and hard laws. And then one more thing that is interesting, the AI, is that in the and also one more thing that is important for SEI is that it is important to have the experiment, and it is important to have the system in which the trial and errors are done. In the case of the drug discovery, we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And also in the case of university experiment, they have the rules for that. And also there could be differences between the experiment in the universities and in academia, and also the experiments in the mass production when we have the accidents and incidents. In what way are we able to have the rollout of technologies or the experiment? So all these could be put into the rules. So hard rules and soft rules are important, and also we could have the rules related to the experiments. So that I think was important. This is a comment, the response to the Dr. Kishimoto's comment, and then to the Dr. Suzuki. I think there are different ways to put it, but one way to put it is that when we use the term mission, we could say this is a social challenge. So if you, it is one way to put this the connection. So social challenge and security challenge, and also we have to think about the industrial competitiveness issue. And so depending on the challenge, there could be different ways to tackle. So for each and every one of them, it is important to have different views. As was mentioned by Dr. Suzuki, that's the proposal he made. But in the case of mission, if you see the wider mission, then there could be different missions. For example, to secure the security is one mission, and industrial competitiveness is another mission. But when we think about the mission, this does not have to be confined in the social agenda. There could be different types. There could be some similarities. There could be some differences. So this is another discussion we have to have. And then with this, the issue of mission is the new. Many people say that, but according to the articles of the emission, at one time, about 30 years ago, there have been some discussions about the industrial policies, and then the industrial policy discussion had been widespread in the international arena. And then in what way should it be captured, and in what way should we have this function? So we talked about how we are able to establish the structures, and this is very much related to what we have to do in the mission. And so in implementing mission, this should not be captured in the existing systems, but again, we have to pay more attention to what is taking place in the society. We have to be sensitive for that. And then there are some similarity with the industrial competitiveness. In that respect, when we think about the industrial competitiveness, we have to think about some commonalities and differences. This might be related to some capabilities of the people involved. So this is something we have to consider. Now, I think relative to security, again, we have to do the same kind of discussion. Then, again, this is going back to what Dr. Kishimoto said, there should be some positive aspects of having regulation for the innovation. And in the case of security, there could be some positives, some negatives. So in the case of security, maybe this impact is much larger than in the regulation. So in the case of security, many people say that this has a negative effect. So in what way are we able to overcome this kind of mindset? In what way are we able to have good management with a good balance on it? And then we have the economic security issue and export, the regulations or controls and the research controls. And then that means that if we try to have too much expectations or chilling effect for the researchers, this is not good. So if we try to stick to that too much, then this would not be very good for the researchers. They would not be able to act freely. So when we think about the mission, this is also very important. I'm sorry, this is what I just said is not streamlined, but this is my response. Thank you very much, Dr. Shiroyama. Lastly, you said the security. Security should be related to the mission, and then in the case of the research R&D, and also research integrity, these are the things that we have to emphasize. And then in that respect, what would be the impact for the research activities as a whole? So that has been the comment from the audience. So this has been I think your comment has been the answers to this. So maybe this is not the area where we have the right answer, but thank you for the comment. So Dr. Suzuki, would you like to make further comment? Maybe after Dr. Borras' response. So Dr. Borras, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, thank you very much. I thank you very much. I mean, to kind of give some kind of comments to Professor Kishimoto, I found it very interesting, this perspective that you are suggesting to integrate regulation from the very beginning of the mission definition, or also all the way through its implementation, and also including also the regulatory impact assessment. I think it's very interesting what you were saying, and also the notion of regulatory competitiveness. We have heard a lot about regulatory competition, and the notion of regulatory competitiveness is coming to terms. Yeah. So I mean, my comment will be that I think it's interesting to think of regulation as an integrated part of the mission, and thinking about the co-evolution between the mission definition, the mission implementation, and its regulation. And then integrated not only in the design, but also in the implementation and the capacity. And I can give you an example, just to be very specific. We want to have green ships and using new technologies for zero emissions. You know, today the ships, they burn a lot of fossil fuels. They're very pollutant. And so we want to have green ships sailing in the problem is that the technologies, there are many possible technologies, and each of them has many different regulatory dimensions to it, of the physical risk that they are. And so regulating, for example, a battery on a ship, or regulating compressed hydrogen on a ship for safety reasons in the ship is very different. It's really different because the technologies are very different. So now many maritime authorities have created some kind of regulatory sandboxes, regulatory playgrounds, where they kind of try to explore and investigate how could this new technology be regulated, And the thing that happens is that there is a co-evolution process between the thinking of those kind of regulatory laboratories together with the development of the technology. And this is actually happening simultaneously and in a co-evolution process. And it's interesting because in a way there's a assessment, constant assessment. And we could actually think about integrating that from the very beginning. And here comes also the importance about the capacity, because the new technologies, the lawyers are not scientists, so they need to be, but they are and the scientists are not lawyers, so they need to collaborate very close to each other to understand and to be able to move this regulatory framework, co-evolving with the technology and co-evolving with the mission solving. So the new capacities will be about having the resources of the manpower, the people, but also the economic resources to dedicate to create these kind of laboratories, regulatory laboratories, to be able to work on that. So I find that very interesting, and that will be agile in a way. This is easier in technologies where the risk is very physical, that, you know, for example, you need regulation to prevent fire on a ship, and then you see the fire and it's very dangerous for the people and it's very dangerous for everything. With artificial intelligence, it's a little bit difficult because it's not seen so, but the risks are real. And you know, the European Union has just passed in the first regulation on artificial intelligence, I think a couple of days ago, which is interesting to see. And this is actually an enabled technology that goes all the way through for all situations. So this is actually it's going to be a lot of trial and error through this kind of new regulation. And this is regulation for regulatory competitiveness, but also for regulatory, keeping an eye on what is going on. So very interesting to think about the missions in this regard. Regarding Professor Suzuki, I think it was very interesting about security and the new geopolitical context in which we are living. That's absolutely true, that we need to be very aware of that. And you mentioned the examples of the US and the new kind of move about that, and microchips that is actually happening, is the hotspot at the moment of microchips. I will also think about security, not only in terms of military defense technologies and the potential use of them, but also in terms of how we also see that in Europe as broader, as much wider, in terms also the problem of supplies. We have seen that due to the pandemic and due to the Russian invasion on Ukraine, all of a sudden supplies of material, supplies of energy were not there. And that is a kind of an issue of security. And I think that most of this very strong push in Europe towards green technologies that are less dependent on oil has to do with the problems of energy supply. So, and that is also a security aspect that is actually quite important. So sometimes we need to think about security in this kind of wider context as well, which is actually shaping very much the missions that we're setting, not only for the environment, for the green solutions, but also because of the problems of supply that we actually currently have. So I hope that that was my contribution to your two very interesting presentations. Thank you.
ボラス先生、どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Dr. Borras. Now, Suzuki-san, or Professor Suzuki, there was a question from the audience regarding the Turing effect. Do you have any comments? Turing effect.
I'm sorry, I was not able to listen to that part. Here, this is about the economic security issue. So increasingly, the economic security is becoming important. And as you know, in the OECD report, the geopolitical issues are emphasized, and within the SDI policy, these geopolitical issues are emphasized. the research integrities are important. Many people are talking about many things. And then among the researchers, they talk about the freedom of the academia and also open research, but the entire landscape are changing. So against this backdrop, the researchers themselves are now feeling chilling effect. So they are now atrophied in a way. They feel the shrunk. And then about the changing of the open innovation, there could be some negative impact. So that's a comment by the audience. So could you tell us a bit about what you think about it? Maybe 1 or 2 words about it? All right. Should I do that in Japanese? Yes, please. Yes, about this chilling effect. I think this is becoming a major issue in the years to come. The reason here is that the technological outflow or leakage of the technology could have an impact for this. So there is a possibility of the military information, military technology, or strategic technologies going out of the country, leaking into the unfriendly countries. So this is important. And also with the open innovation, we do have the positive effect or positive implications. So the most important would be to strike a good balance between the two ways of thinking about it, who to trust, who to be wary of, from whom should we not receive money, and also who to collaborate with. So this kind of due diligence is needed. For example, we can be prepared for the researchers from the country of some concerns, but in the case of researchers or researches, in the case where the joint research is warranted because the technology would not be converted into the military technologies, and also as was mentioned by Dr. Borras, the dependent path is something we have to avoid. So if we have some dependence on the certain path, then in that situation we have to be prepared. So we have to place more emphasis on the security implications rather than the open innovation and open science. So there could be some the sectors in which we have to pay more attention to the security. Again, we have to say that things are more tight, and this is more difficult for many people to have free access. But maybe if we are able to think about the understanding of what to be prepared for, what to be worried about, then in that situation, this kind of chilling effect would be controlled. So we have the Economic Security Promotion Act in Japan. In this act, it describes certain the technology area. So there are the areas, the sensitive areas to be prepared for. So the EU and the United States would continue working on this. So they would think about certain technologies in which it is very risky to have collaboration with the researchers from certain countries. Certainly, there are a lot of gray areas on the realistic terms. So for these realistic areas, we have to be vigilant. So that's something we have to discuss in the years to come. In that respect, Dr. Borras, you talked about security concept, and the security concept is now changing, not only covering military and the national security, but also we are talking about supply chain the security. So including all these, researchers would have to pay more attention to the literacy in the geopolitical issues. Thank you very much, Dr. Suzuki. Then with this, we'd like to go into the general discussion. As a matter of fact, I have prepared 2 issues, but before getting into this, I'd like to invite Dr. Kurokawa to make a comment, and then after that, we'd like to move on to the discussions by raising some issues. So Dr. Kurokawa is a professional member, and he is a senior fellow at the Tokyo Foundation for Policy Research, and also he is a specially appointed the professor at the Kanagawa the medical university, So I, I think what I'm going to say is very much related to Dr. Kishimoto's comment about regulations. So this is yet another comment or round of issues. So especially I talked about pharmaceutical affairs. So I'm also thinking about the innovation in the society for the new innovations in the pharmaceutical or medical areas. There are two things. One is about the policy instruments issue mentioned by Dr. Borras. So can we safely say that we have good design for policy instruments? We try to think about innovation promotion, but after that, when we have the implementation in the society, for example, the drug prices and approval, the seeking processes. So to a certain extent, the innovations are driven, but we have to say this is only partial, not the all in all. So we have to say that innovation is not properly assessed. This is not only about the effectiveness or the efficacy, but also in the case of Japan, we have drug price the regulations. So are we able to say that our drug price the regulations are in line with the promotion of innovation? And because of that, many non-Japanese companies are getting out of the Japanese market. So we have to say we are suffering from drug loss. And then going back to the elimination of cancer, as was mentioned by the earlier speaker, and also the elimination of rare diseases. But then these are the missions, but we have to think about lower order issues. For example, the policy coordination is not properly done. So we still have many things. So innovation should be should be assessed, and then if we have innovation, we have to have higher prices. But at this point, it is impossible to do so. So that's another issue that we have to face with. And also about the capability, I think this is going to be one of the topics that it's taking up in the general issue. For Dr. Borras talked about the capability and the capacity of the public sector. But public sector would not be the only party to enhance the capability. To be more specific, in the case of pharmaceutical industry, we have the medical devices equipped with AI. And is it possible to have proper control and the regulation with the regulatory authorities alone? As a matter of fact, this is very difficult, if not impossible. So if we are thinking about the introduction of AI in the medical devices, it's difficult. So in the case of Japan, we don't have the reviewer of this kind of technology with a high level of expertise in the technology. So they have to hire somebody from outside. It is impossible to secure personnel who is able to do this. So we have to have foreseeable. We have to look into the foreseeable future so that they are able to secure people. But this does not sound like the reality. In that situation, they have to acquire people from outside. In what way are they able to recruit people from outside who will be able to work on the design of the new regulation? Who is knowledgeable, who has expertise? So in that situation, we have to seek for the personnel in the academia or in the industry who have the direct contact with this new technology. So this way we are able to change the scope of the regulation. So this is increasingly important. And last point, the stakeholders should be involved with the regulation. In that situation, we have to pay attention to the capture. For example, in the case of power industry, after 311, there has been mentioned that the regulatory authorities have been a part of the power industry. So that means that regulatory authority was not doing their job. They tried to come up with the kind of regulation to promote the profit of the power industry. So the private industry should be involved. To what extent are we able to secure transparency? Are we able to secure competitiveness? And then if not, that means that we will have a regulation which should be representative of only one industry or one only company. So the social responsibility should be secured by securing this factor. As a matter of fact, in the case of pharmaceutical, the medical industry, should be the changes of these systems in order to incorporate the AI in the device, and this is a reflection of the request from this, and also about the regenerative medicine. And Dr. Shiroyama talked about the regulation in the area of experiment, and this is very much related to this. So this is again. They have been the farm, which is the industry, the organization, and also the academic, the society of the regenerative medicine. They worked hand in hand to work on this. So for the people who are the expertise and the skills, it is important to get them involved in the regulation, the formation. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kurokawa. Now we'd like to move on to the general discussions. In the beginning, we were going to cover two topics. One was about the mechanism for policy coordination. We wanted to have some in-depth discussion around it. And the other is about human resource development. We talked about talent several times today. So this is about how we can train and nurture people who can coordinate among different aspects. But because of the time limitation, why don't we just focus on the second topic, human resources development. Well, this research group or project is going to end at the end of this fiscal year. However, we are now working on the final report. In there, the policy coordination mechanism, as well as the issues that were raised by the various speakers today, will be incorporated into the report. And also in September last year, we had a policy coordination and the STI policy, mission-oriented policy relationship were discussed with the OECD representatives as well as the European countries members. And then there were some comments on that, so please refer to the final report. And towards the end of the report, we talk about the talent development. We discussed it already. Therefore, this time, we want to have a further discussion on the same subject. And the next time, the theme that we're going to choose should be related to STI governance, as well as the talent who can coordinate all these efforts. Therefore, we would like to use this discussion as an input to the next research theme. And when we think about the human resources development, as Kurokawa sensei said earlier, and also Dr. Borras also covered that in the keynote at the beginning. The people who connect various knowledge areas, and that's one thing, but another thing is connecting various sectors. And also Professor Suzuki talked about the science background and non-science background are quite divisive in Japan, but we have to have an integrated approach. In order to promote STI, we have to have the knowledge from STI as well as social studies. So the interdisciplinary coordination as well as coordination within the same discipline is necessary, as well as the connection between academia and non-academia, policy and academia. And also, Kurokawa sensei talked about the connection between private and public sectors. So there are different coordinations necessary. So intersectorial, disciplinary coordination. So on top of that, those talent also should be able to capable of realize that. And we need a mechanism and training to enable that. So that's another aspect we want to cover. So in any of these areas, if you have any comment, which connection or coordination do you think is most important? And if you have any solution, ideas to address that connection or coordination, please give us suggestions. Who should we start with? Maybe Shiroyama-san? I don't know whether I can respond to your question in a pinpoint way or not. I'm not sure, but let me share with you my comments. basically what Dr. Matsuo said is true. But what kind of capabilities, capacities do we need? So from our discussions, we focused on coordination capability. But whether that is the right answer or not is one question. For example, today, Dr. Borras talked about talent, and page 20 addresses the question. So the framework of Dr. Borras in capacity, there are roles, resources, and abilities, those three. And in the case of abilities, there can be analytical abilities, coordination abilities, operational abilities, and learning abilities. So defining abilities by those 4 areas, well, there are different frameworks, but this is one of the ways. On the other hand, as we discussed today, when we think about how actually, what capabilities we need, law, science, technology, we need to bridge those fields. And also scientific and social studies have to be bridged. So those are different ways of looking at the areas of abilities. So in terms of those 4, I think coordinating abilities is one thing maybe we are focusing. And also what we are focusing is also related to learning abilities, because to do the learning, you have to have operation. And then if you just become a captive person, then you can't learn anymore. So you have to do the learning and also practice at the same time. So those seems to be one of the key areas to us. So maybe we are focusing on those coordination abilities, but whether this focus is the right focus or not is a question. For example, analytical capabilities. We didn't discuss it in an explicit manner. Of course, we are saying that we need to have a communication capability as one of the coordination capabilities, but we are not talking about the analytical expert analysis capability, but depending on the area we do, this is quite important. Otherwise, the people cannot manage such mission or projects without the analytical abilities. Therefore, so we focus very much on coordination ability and the learning abilities, but is that the right way or not? Is the big question. So that's my first comment. And the second comment is about the mechanism. Matsuo-san said what to do with the individual capabilities is one thing, but another is the mechanism of how to secure and allocate people from the site field. We need a certain distance, but these people should also have accessibility to the fields. So that kind of balance is important, theory and practice. And also between the law expert, regulation, and technology, for one person to have all of this is impossible. Therefore, maybe the mechanism of teaming up those talents is important. So that's a question of team building. Anyways, we need such a mechanism. So that's the second point that I wanted to stress. In that sense, from Dr. Borras' comments, among the roles, resources, and abilities, in terms of resources, it's monetary, human resources, and regulations, and so forth. And the roles, I think, are close to what we are discussing as mechanisms. And Dr. Borras talked about the roles, and probably we can focus on those roles discussion going forward, because we are not asking for Superman. So in order to be realistic and to make it happen, the roles have to be discussed more going forward. So those are the 2 comments. Thank you very much, Dr. Shiroyama. Going forward, those are the areas that we are doing the researches on. So if we have already the perfect answers, and then it doesn't make sense to have a research project. So don't give us all the answers. But in terms of the framework, Dr. Borras gave us the framework, and Dr. Shiroyama discussed the 3 pillar framework. Borras, Dr. Borras, do you have any reaction to the comments so far?
Thank you very much. I think it's a really great comment. Yes, I think that obviously this is the more we want to put the technology into solving real problems now in a short time, and they're complex problems, then the more we need to think about how we design the whole way of doing it. And we need to bring the different perspectives. So the public and the private, coordinate the public and the private, the science and non-science, and the different disciplines, and the law and the technical aspects. So yes, there's a lot of kind of, open a little bit up and bring this knowledge to work together, and to be able to change the way we do things. And therefore I agree that it's also not only about getting the coordination, but it's also about the learning. So the organizations and individuals being able to learn and being able to explore and engage in new ways. I think that we need to think about coordination. Sometimes we think about the perfect world structured and the perfect coordination. If we create the perfect structures, then the coordination will happen as magic. And sometimes coordination does not happen that way. And it has more to do with individual people inside organizations being able to have these contacts outside the organization, and creating the context where these people meet and where these organizational barriers go down. And so yes, I agree that it's also about the mechanisms to team up, to put people together, because there are no perfect structures. I think there's also about the people that populate those structures, the people that are there making things happen inside the organizations. And we should kind of remember that. So we need to improve the capacity, the overall capacity of our organizations, to make them, to strengthen their resources, to strengthen their abilities, the way they do things. But we should also remember that it is all about the people and the motivation of the people. For example, going to the context of Kurokawa, in the medical world, the patient organizations are very strong organizations in terms of knowledge. They know, they leave their families living with patients, and they acquire knowledge that is actually very useful for the medical treatment. So there's an important way of incorporating that. So creating these mechanisms, that is actually quite important. But again, each disease or each technology is different, and this kind of coordination might be different according to the different needs of the technology. For example, just talking about back into the shipping area, liquefied hydrogen or compressed hydrogen are different things. They're quite different in the way they're managed, and the way that we kind of regulate that, and the way we need to kind of coordinate the different actors is different, because even if it's hydrogen, it's quite different in the way it operates in real time. And so all the technology, how it is being developed, and the way in which things need to be operating, the ship operates, and the way it is regulated, is going to be very different according to this technology. So when we think about coordination, we need to think about also the specific context in which we operate, and that's actually quite important. And there are no ready-made solutions. So what works well in a coordination for a specific mission might not be the perfect for another mission. And so we need to kind of think about this kind of, learning all the time and changing and experimenting. And this coordination happens through this kind of mindset, and giving this capacity to the organizations, but also to the individuals inside the organizations. So, thank you.
はい、ありがとうございます。やはりなかなか
Thank you very much. There is no sturdy answer. So there is no the direct answer to this in order to solve these. So we don't have a perfect structure, and it is impossible to expect something perfect in this area, but rather we can think about each mission and each situation, each context, and the situation would be different. Recipes related to that would be totally different from each other. So it is important to continue experimenting and changing yourself, maybe reinforcing people and reinforcing the structure, or reinforcing the capabilities of the organization. But still, we can draw some lessons from the best practices. If we are able to share the experiences, then we would be able to raise the level of learning. So in that respect, I think it's important to collaborate with Dr. Borras. So we would like to continue having exchanges with your team, Dr. Borras. Then Dr. Kishimoto and Dr. Suzuki, would you like to make a comment? Then after that, we'd like to ask Dr. Kurokawa to make a comment. And then maybe we have to close this panel discussion. So Dr. Kishimoto, would you like to start? Sure. In a way, we are not only talking about bottom-up or mission-oriented or problem-oriented, or if you are talking about top-down approaches in the mission-oriented, in a situation, connection is of the essence. So in that respect, it is not that we do everything with the mission-oriented way. Sometimes we have to do things from in the bottom-up approaches. In the case of researchers, if everything is mission-oriented, then in this situation they have to be worried about the elimination of his or her own area. So it is important to have good mixture of this. So sometimes we see the changes of the proportion of the bottom-up and the top-down. Top-down meaning mission-oriented or program-oriented. And if we are seeing the increase of the mission-oriented and the program-oriented, the researchers, then the structure should change. In the case of ministries and agencies, for example, in the economy or agriculture, or maybe the culture, they have been the structures based on the bottom-up approach. But now we have cabinet office, which is the top-down. So increasingly, the cabinet office would have a major role. Then in that situation, we have to have different sets of the resources. In the case of universities, they not only work on the basic research, but also innovation is needed. URA, University Research Administrator, is a new job that is increasingly important. And so the universities are trying to increase the number of people, URAs, and they try to develop people. So come to think of it, mission-orientedness is now changing the overall nature of the university. In the past, they had the siloed structure, fragmented structure, but it is no longer making any sense. And then also looking into the businesses, they have missions and purposes, and they are exerting their effort, utilizing and centering around these missions. So within the businesses, they have mission-oriented task groups or projects, or maybe they have some missions meant for the realization of the strategies. So they have to work on certain things from scratch. So within the businesses, they try to look into the people as the human resources. So broadly speaking, within the ESG, they have non-financial resources, the criteria, and then human resources can be put into this. And so this is not something we are able to measure, so this cannot be put into the financial the indicators, but maybe in the future they will have major value for that. So within the company, within the businesses, they try to have good collaboration with the public arena. So this is the lobbying activity, and also there could be industry academia collaboration. And so many people who would be able to connect these two areas would be something that they have to focus on. So within the business, they have to drive the people's capability who can bring about the industry academia collaboration. So visualization is becoming important. So this kind of human resources development is becoming more important, and the visualization of this and also putting value for that is increasingly important in a parallel manner. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we would like to go to Professor Suzuki then. Are you still there? Yes, I am. Well, Kishimoto-san's comments, I agree with them. More specifically, when it comes to securities area, recently companies talk about the economic security office or geopolitical unit. They are organizing, forming those units within the organizations of the companies. Well, in the past, so far, they were relying on the external parties, or they thought that they were not directly relevant to their business, but they are now seeking connection with those new areas. And those are new developments that we see recently. And at the same time, in terms of research integrity, in research institutions and universities, export control, well, they used to focus only on compliance. That was the main area of focus in those research institutions, but gradually they are shifting their focus to research integrity and other types of intelligence. What are risky information? They are trying to get more knowledge and education. So there are administrators' positions in those organizations today. So that is also the bridging talent who are serving those roles, and those talent is very sought. So in terms of mission-oriented, Shiroyama said earlier, when we think about mission, there are different levels, different technologies, and different stakeholders involved. So the question is how to put together all these stakeholders is necessary. Those are the types of leadership talent, because complex technologies and the stakeholder relationships have to be coordinated, and someone who can speak to all of the stakeholders in different levels, displaying sort of leadership, that's also needed. So Shiroyama-san used the term Superman, and this person has to be a Superman. Maybe Superman is too good to be true, but institutionally or by mechanism, can we secure such potential? Well, it's not easy because it really depends on each individual talent and the capabilities and attributes. In that sense, so I belong to the Space Policy Commission. In this commission, the good talent, like Mr. Goto, the chair of Save Holdings, he is serving as the head of the committee. And before that was Kasai-san from JR Tokai Company. So these industrial leaders, there are some people, leaders, who adapt with different sectors and can discuss also about policy implications, although they are not the direct stakeholders, but with certain distance, they can keep and can still have the holistic viewpoint. There are leaders like that. Excuse me. So if we can identify those leaders and to take leadership, they can bridge different talent and different areas. I think that is enabled by these people. Of course, this is not a perfect solution, but some leaders in the business sector and can serve as these roles. And I think individual capability is that counts. Well, the people is very critical, and it can depend on certain individuals. But the mechanism to identify and deploy this talent, that's something that we can do, secure the mechanism. Lastly, we want to go to Kurokawa sensei, and then lastly, Shiroyama sensei, could you give us the closing remarks? Kurokawa sensei first. Yes, thank you. In terms of the bridging person, it's difficult to define the people who have the ability to bridge different expertise and knowledge in different sectors. Well, it's a tough task. in the university or higher education, we did not nurture those types of talent strategically in the past. As a career path, as a result of different experiences, we fortunately came up with those talent eventually, but that was not intentional. So revolving door is something they can emphasize these people, but in Japan it's not working so well. But not recently, we are beginning to see this kind of talent because during COVID, the private sector knowledge or expertise is now used for the public decision during COVID pandemic. And so for AI and regenerative medicine laws and regulations, we are using the input from the public sector, private sector these days. In that sense, the path for utilizing the knowledge of different sectors is becoming more open in Japan. And also at the same time, now is the time when the bureaucrats are job hopping, and that means that their public expertise is now being made and used in private sector as well, beyond just a secondment. And the same is true the other way. The private sector people are now being hired into the government offices as a mid-career talent. So these types of revolving door was not happening in the past in Japan, but it's changing to the good direction. In my area, healthcare, public affairs, government area affairs, this was the weak area for the Japanese companies, and it seems that there is strong control by the government people, but medical affairs, this is much stronger today. And also, on the other hand, in the legislation process, if the private sector people are involved, and then there will be more motivation for the private companies to invest more, and new talent, the companies will pool new types of talent, and they can be involved in the government affairs as well. So rather than just intentionally nurturing these people, it seems that fortunately we are coming up with those multi-versatile talent more and more in Japan. So that's a hopeful development, I think. That's all. Thank you very much. I think we are right on time. Shiroyama sensei, could you do you have a response? Yes, I do. I do have a response. But if possible, Matsuo-san or Kishimoto-san, could you also respond? Because there was a question. The second question was already answered, but not the first one and the third one. The first question is, since the Cabinet Office initiated the Innovation Council and SIP policy, the number of citations and Japanese papers decreased in the international arena. That was a concern. And the last question is about the SIT or project or instruments. When we set those, how the impact can be evaluated. And for the first question, when SIP policy was started, that was back in 2014 or so, when the Cabinet Office was assigned with an additional budget of about 50 billion yen. And they did not eat up the existing R&D projects. However, it's true that the growth of R&D papers have decreased because when other countries are increasing public funding for R&D, Japan decreased the R&D. That's why the number of papers has decreased. That's true. But the research grants, there's always a time lag. Well, the Nobel Prize winners will be born 30 years later after the investment. So there is not a direct impact, but there may be some impact on later on. Yeah. And the third question, probably there is a regulatory impact, and investment impact has to be measured. And in the case of SDI, there are uncertainties, so it's very difficult to measure the impact. But now that is questioned or required, so that's more difficult today. But Matsuo sensei, you have other projects, you are involved. Therefore, maybe it can be quantified not only by money, but also social capital or the network between the researchers. But clear impact measurement is difficult. So on those two questions, do you have anything to add, Matsuo-san or Kishimoto-san? What shall we do? For the first question, I don't know the answer. Does anybody have any comment on the first question? If not, maybe for the second question, Kishimoto-san, maybe you can supplement my comment. But my comment is as follows. If we are to pursue mission-oriented project, we have to make it transformative. And then whether there was a transformative impact or not can be measured by the change in society. So the social change, impact, that's difficult to be quantified. But they are the target of measurement going forward. So how can we do the measurement of social change? Like in the past, we set KPIs with the numerical targets. It's not as clear-cut as in the past. However, still, we can try different things.
So depending on the project, also mentioned by Shiroyama sensei, we could have a new network, or maybe we can have new scope to be covered. And there could be some entry into the different areas. So there could be new changes, and in what way is it possible to visualize these changes? And I'm not only talking about the numerical changes, but rather there could be some narratives associated with the change. So this kind of discussion is warranted. It is gaining momentum, but at the same time, we have to understand that we don't have a clear the KPI to measure that. So that's the reason why we are using the term the trial and errors. So we are talking about the kind of things that would be driven by the project, or we could see the future. And then the prerequisite here is that we understand the current society. In the case of SIP, as was mentioned by Shiroyama sensei, and also as he is well aware, we have, for example, the XX, the readiness level, and so we have the technological readiness level, for example, and so we are able to understand the stage of the technology, and also we pay attention to the governance readiness levels, social readiness, business readiness level. And so these are the things that is used for the understanding of the society. Depending on the impact of the project, what are the changes? So we have to think about the impact pathway. That's the term we always use, direct impact pathway, and also the indirect pathway, and also the positive and negative, and also network changes and the things that took place after the completion of the project, and the changes in the narratives. So these are the methods with which we're able to assess and evaluate the project. It's already past the closing time, but Dr. Kishimoto, would you like to make a comment? Maybe Dr. Borras, in Europe, in what way do you measure the social impact? So could you tell us a bit about how you are assessing the social impact? Please answer briefly, starting with Dr. Kishimoto, please. In the case of Japanese, the policy assessment, we have the R&D over the cost of 1 billion. So the policy assessment is needed. So the R&D and the public study and ODA, these are the areas covered. And then on top of that, we have the regulated areas on top of it. So impact assessments is done. But again, they are not connected with each other. So this is a siloed or fragmented approaches. In the case of the public, the research, so this is only the cost effectiveness. In the case of regulation, the cost effectiveness is not properly measured. In the case of R&D, and also ODA, official development aid or assistance. They are qualitative, so we look at the integrity and the equity and the effectiveness. So these are the criteria with which they are assessed. So within this strategy, the method we are able to have, we have not been able to have the quantitative the assessment, and also we have been working on it on a trial basis. But in terms of systems, it is not done at this point. Thank you. Thank you very much. Finally, Dr. Borras, would you like to make an additional comment, please?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have very little comments. I think the impact assessment is a very important aspect, and it's very difficult. We have evaluations of the output of projects, of the outcome, and of the impact. So it's kind of output is small, outcome is bigger, and impact is bigger and longer term. So impact assessment is always very complex to do. And I think that there are a lot of efforts to do models and systems to approach, but there's a lot of work to be done. I think we are very good at measuring output, but we are not good at measuring impact in a broader context. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。やはりインパクト
Thank you very much. In the case of impact, there could be many confounding factors, and also in terms of time frame, we don't know where to stop, where to go beyond. So looking at the impact as a whole would be a very difficult issue. So that's something I felt as I listened to what you said. We'd like to continue discussing the issue internally. So it's already past the scheduled closing time, but thank you very much for staying with us. So Dr. Shiroyama, would you like to make the final comment, please? Thank you. Time was limited, but we were able to have very fruitful discussions. And also we have been able to receive many questions from the audience. This time, this was done as a project for this Tokyo Foundation for Policy Research, and also, as was mentioned by Dr. Matsuo, this is within the framework of the reconstructing the science and technology policy system. We are formulating the report. So if you are interested, please take a look at it, which is due in a short while. And also capacity development that we talked about is something we would like to focus on. We'd like to move on to the next phase of the project. In that respect, this kind of opportunity is very important, and we'd like to continue having this kind of the event. And so we'd like to ask for your feedback on what we do. So if you are able to give us some feedback, we are more than ready to reflect that onto our future work. So Dr. Borras, the panel members, thank you so very much. With this, we'd like to close the International Workshop on New Developments of Science and Technology Innovation Policies in Japan and Europe. After the completion of this session, we'd like to move to the questionnaire survey screen. So in order to raise the level of quality, we'd like to ask for your cooperation in filling out the questionnaire survey. Thank you very much.